From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. The U.S. has sent 230 cargo planes and 20 ships loaded with weapons and military equipment to Israel since it began its aggression against Palestine on October 7th. According to Israeli media, U.S. military assistance includes artillery shells, armored vehicles, and basic combat tools for soldiers. Yediot Ahronot newspaper reports that Israel's defense ministry estimates the cost of the current war on Gaza is approximately $17 billion. Citing a defense ministry official, the newspaper says the army had used most of the ammunition in its warehouses at the beginning of the war. At least 489 Israeli soldiers had been killed in clashes with Palestinian fighters in Gaza since October 7th. At least 240 people have been killed and 382 injured in Israel's latest attacks on Gaza in the last 24 hours. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reports that an attack on Tuesday killed at least 10 people in Khan Yunis, where eyewitnesses report an unprecedented intensity of shelling by Israeli artillery. The headquarters of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is also in Khan Yunis, was also shelled by Israeli artillery, causing injuries. The Israeli military has attacked 100 locations in southern Gaza. Footage from Al Jazeera shows extensive destruction of houses and buildings in Beit Lahia. One Israeli soldier succumbed to a fungal infection he contracted in Gaza, and several others are being treated for the same infection. It is suspected the fungus originated from contaminated soil caused by damaged waste treatment facilities in Gaza. The Israeli army has also arrested leading Palestinian politician Khaled al-Jarrar in the occupied West Bank, along with other members of her left-wing party. Christmas Eve celebrations in the West Bank city of Bethlehem were halted due to Israel's war on Palestine. In an emotional speech, the Reverend Munzer Isaac said, "Christ is under the rubble. We are angry, broken, and mourning." During his sermon, the church's nativity display featured a symbolic baby Jesus in Palestinian attire amidst rubble. Speaking at a service entitled Christ in the Rubble, a liturgy of lament, at the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church, Isaac described Gaza as a site of annihilation and genocide. He criticized the world's unequal treatment of Palestinians and called for global attention to Israel's war against Palestine. Isaac emphasized that Christmas transcends materialism and urged an end to the ongoing genocide. The Jordanian army conducted its 7th airdrop of humanitarian aid to about 800 mostly Palestinian Christians on Tuesday. The move was a show of solidarity on Christmas Eve as aid packages were delivered onto the Church of St. Porphyrius in northern Gaza to help those sheltering inside. Palestinian Christians and their children have sought refuge at the house of worship as Israeli forces surround the area. They have been facing severe food shortages and lack of basic necessities amid Israel's ongoing attacks. Israel kills more than 1,000 elderly Palestinians. Details after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor reports that over 1,049 elderly Palestinians in Gaza have been killed during the 10-week Israeli offensive. The rights group accuses Israel of turning all Gaza residents into targets since the start of the war on October 7th. Most elderly victims died under their homes' debris or while searching for essentials. Euromed Monitor cites incidents where Israeli soldiers allegedly shot elderly individuals immediately after evacuation orders or post-arbitrary detention. The report also highlights individual cases, including that of Dr. Akram Abu Hasira, killed by Israeli troops. Elderly Gazans continue to face severe threats of starvation and disease due to restricted access to food, medicine, and sanitation. A FarRight activist in Texas mailed what Muslims are saying is an Islamophobic holiday card to voters in the legislative district of Texas House Speaker Dade Filan. The card sarcastically wishes recipients a happy Ramadan and includes photos of Filan at a Ramadan event held earlier in the year. The cards were funded by Kerry Cheshire. He is executive director for Texans for Strong Borders, an influential right-wing group that pushes legislators to crack down on legal and illegal immigration. Cheshire says the cards aim to highlight what he perceives as Filan's pro-Muslim stance. Muslim Texans, as well as Democrats and some Republicans, say it promotes Islamophobia and fails to reflect Christian values. They also call the cards divisive and offensive. Over 400,000 Muslims live in Texas. New Jersey Congressman Bill Pascrell is facing a growing challenge to his re-election bid due to his stance on Israel's war on Palestine. In the past election, Pascrell received strong support from the Arab American community. But Arab Americans recently protested outside his district office in Paterson, criticizing his support for Israel. Former backers now label him a charlatan and a mouthpiece for the dehumanization of Palestinian people. They are considering supporting Democratic challengers in the upcoming election. The rift underscores divisions within the Democratic Party following Israel's war on Palestine. While Pascrell has advocated for a humanitarian pause and more aid for Gaza, some Arab American constituents find his stance insufficient. A senior official of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has been killed in an Israeli attack in a suburb of Damascus. Iranian media reports that Saeed Razi, a senior military advisor for the IRGC in Syria, was killed in an airstrike in the Sayyida Zainab neighborhood. Iran's Tasnim news agency reports that Razi was one of the oldest IRGC military advisors serving in Syria. His killing came amid a series of attacks on U.S. military bases and Israeli interests in Iraq and Syria in recent weeks. Iran maintains a significant military presence in Syria, which has fueled tension between Tehran and Washington, as American forces are also stationed there. The IRGC Public Relations Department says Israel will pay a price for his death. Outrage has gripped Indian-administered Kashmir following the deaths of 3 Muslim men after being taken into custody by the Indian Army. Muhammad Shaukat, Safir Hussain, and Shabir Ahmad are believed to have been tortured during interrogation. They were among 8 people detained in connection with an ambush on Indian troops in Poonch district, where 4 soldiers were killed by unknown assailants. Family members of the victims were called by the police to claim the bodies, which reportedly displayed signs of severe torture. Muhammad Iqbal, a local businessman and an uncle of one of the victims, told the New York Times the men were innocent civilians. Disturbing videos circulating on social media purportedly showed the men being tortured. Outraged relatives and locals are demanding justice for the 3 men. The Indian Army claims to be investigating the incident, but faces skepticism from critics who argue that justice and accountability cannot be ensured by local authorities. The region has witnessed increased repression since the revocation of Kashmir's limited autonomy in 2019. Also, the recent suspension of a life sentence and bail granted to an army captain accused of killing civilians in the region has further fueled tensions. Protests in Indian-occupied Kashmir have been met with internet shutdowns and restrictions on information dissemination. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is facing criticism and anger from criminal justice reform advocates after vetoing key legislation over the weekend. Senate Bill S-7548, known as the Challenging Wrongful Convictions Act, aimed to make it easier for wrongfully convicted individuals, even those who had pled guilty, to seek exoneration. This bill addressed the issue of wrongful convictions in a state with the 3rd highest number in the country. Despite strong support from reformers, it faced staunch opposition from prosecutors. Hochul's second veto was of the Fair Courts for Immigrant New Yorkers Act. That would have required courts to inform non-citizen defendants of deportation risks before accepting plea deals. Advocates argued that this veto disregards the rights and dignity of immigrant communities and leaves them vulnerable to injustices within the legal system. The decisions have been met with outrage, with critics accusing the governor of neglecting the rights of innocent individuals and immigrant New Yorkers. New York County Defender Services Executive Director Stan German said that innocent New Yorkers will continue to sit in our jails and prisons as a result of the veto. A Missouri school board has voted 5-2 to eliminate elective courses on Black history and literature. These had been offered for the last 2 years in a predominantly white suburban area near St. Louis. The vote against the classes was led by conservative members of the all-white Francis Howell School Board. They were supported by a conservative political action committee, Francis Howell Families, claiming they promote critical race theory. The move comes 5 months after the same board revoked an anti-discrimination policy that had been initiated after the 2020 murder of George Floyd, which led to historic nationwide protests against racism and police brutality. Parents and students are demanding that the courses be retained, and protests erupted outside the board meeting. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.